Hello and welcome to this tutorial on making some different value scales using some different painting materials. So here's what we're going to be working with today. I'm going to show you some watercolors and some tempera paints. Now we're also going to take a look at some alternatives to watercolors, but they work very similarly. For instance, did you know you can paint with markers? And I'm going to show you some watercolor pencils. What you're not going to need is any brush that's bigger than this number 4. It's just a round brush, so just a small brush. You'll need a water cup. You may want some paper towels, and then you'll need your watercolors. So you can choose any color for this process. And you notice that I used some different shapes this time. Sometimes it's fun to find a shape that's at least an inch wide, so you might want to measure it. You want a nice solid shape. You don't want to have to do a ton of little teeny tiny details. So you want to be able to do it quickly, and you want to have a decent size so that you are able to mix and do what you need in a quick way. I'm going to start with watercolors here. I'm going to start by prepping my paper, and I'm going to paint inside my apple with just water. That's just going to prepare the page and allow my paint to spread a little bit better once I get going, but it's also going to kind of contain the paint will only really go where there is water. So I'm going to dip, swipe, and swish and get just a little bit of blue on here. I'm going to add it in here. I'm trying to make a light value so I can clean off my brush, dip and swipe, and I can push it around. If I were working on watercolor paper, this would work so much easier. Spreads a little bit better, but it'll work. So notice how I took just some water, and that'll spread that out. So now I'm ready for the next one. I'm going to start it the same way. Get some water on that paper, wake it up so it's ready. And this time I can use a little bit more pigment. So I want to get a little bit more paint as I fill this in. Now, that might feel like, that to me is feeling like it's going to be closer to this, so I'm going to take some water real quick, just a quick cleaning out of my brush, and I'm going to try and pull some of that blue around. And I'm going to continue on through these. Painting with water first again. Going ahead and getting a little bit more pigment this time. I want a nice vibrant blue, but I don't want my blue to be sticky. I need a little bit more pigment, so I get some water. Go back into my paint. There we go. So it flows nice and easy on there. Now these are looking a little bit close, so I can go back into pigment one more time and let that really kind of saturate that area, and then we'll let that dry. And next we'll talk about mixing some black. So I want this to be an absolute shade of watercolor of the blue. So again, I prep my space with some water. I can start with blue. It's my lighter color. When we're painting, we always want to start with the lighter color. I want it to be dark, so I'm not worried about adding too much blue right now. But I got to clean my brush quickly, dip and swish into my black some, and add that. Ooh, that got really dark. Do you see that? So I'm going to clean my brush out, and I'm going to pull that blue around, or that black, excuse me, so that it's mixing more with the blue. I don't necessarily want this to be black. I want to see a shade. There we go. Now it's looking more like a dark blue. And then those can just be left to dry. So next, we're ready for temperas. Now that I've got my temperas out here, you can see that I have my hue, blue, I have the black, and I have a little bit of white. Not a lot of paint is needed. You're only painting 4 shapes in. I probably actually even have too much right here. So I also have 3 dimples here to be able to mix in for my different tints and shades and hues. And this one, it's really, really important to remember that when you're trying to mix your lighter colors, you always start with the lighter color. So I'm just going to take a touch of that white, clean my brush, scrub, swipe, dab on my paper towel. That dabbing on the paper towel will allow you to keep your dirty water from messing up your paints. So I added just a little touch of blue there. And I have a pretty decent light blue here, but I think I can make it lighter. So I'm going to use this though because I think this would make a great blue for this fruit right here. So I kind of skipped the process there, but that's because I knew I had a good candidate here. Might as well go ahead and use it. And now I can clean my brush and use that paint that's left. I know I want to get lighter, so I'm going to go back to white. Oh, that might be a little too much. Dip back into my white, and I'm going to mix it in the same spot to see if I can get a nice light blue. There we go. Now let's see how this one looks on the paper. Yeah. There's that sky blue. So you can use your judgment. Problem solve those things. If you think you got too dark, can you use it somewhere else? Or do you just need to go ahead and change it before you add it? And that way you're making the absolute most of the paint that you have in your palette. Because this tempera dries quickly. So now I have a light, a little bit darker. I can go ahead and say, you know what, I kind of want this third one to just be blue. This is going to be my true hue. Because that's my next logical step. Just working in quickly. If you accidentally go outside your lines, it's okay. This is just an exercise to practice. And now I'm ready to do my black. And remember, black is super strong. So when I'm mixing my shade, I'm going to start with a couple dips into the blue. I want to be extra careful also with just how much black I add. Dip, swipe, or dip, scrub, swipe, dab. Excuse me. One tiny little dip of black to mix into what I have here. That's decent. Let's put it on the paper next to the others to see what it really looks like. I could almost get away with just a tiny bit more black in that, but for this exercise, I think that's going to be okay. It will dry a little bit lighter. Temperas do that. They dry a little bit lighter than the color than when they're wet. Now you notice down here, when we do watercolor pencils and markers, I'm going to recommend you get a test strip of watercolor paper and tape it into your sketchbook or wherever you happen to be working on this. So, and I didn't quite plan out my spacing very well, so I've got one that's cut a little bit short there, but that's okay. You can plan yours out better than mine, right? So let's get ready for some markers and watercolor pencils. Now, when you're painting with markers, like many of the other kind of colored pencils things, you might have available to you some natural different shades of your hue. So if I'm sticking to blue this time, I've got a light blue marker, and this is the kind of fun part here where I can color it in. I'm going to try to do about half of the apple in marker just so you can see how this works. I'm going to take a brush with just water on it, and I'm going to activate that marker, and ooh, it just glides around. I wanted to pull it. It needed a little bit of thinning out. So I'll find another spot to show you colored pencils, watercolor pencils. Okay, and then I can do the same. So if I want this to be kind of that light blue, I'm going to try what I did with that light blue, and I'm going to try half. You can see that as I pull it, it's much lighter over here than where I colored with the washable marker. And if I still think that's a little too dark, I can always take my paper towel and just press and kind of dab it up. That looks like a better match. So on and so forth. I'm going to skip because this is pretty much going to be the same. I'm going to color, but I'm going to color the whole apple and then activate it with the water. Here, I'm going to color it with the blue, and then I'll take some black, and again, just activate it with a wet, clean brush, and it mixes. So much fun. And there you have markers. Now let's take a look at watercolor pencils. Now that we have the markers as watercolors finished, I'm going to show you how to work with these watercolor pencils. So you can do a couple of different things. Here again, when you open it up, you may find that you already have a light blue, and you have another blue, and you'll probably want your black. So the same principles apply that we've been using in the regular watercolors and here. If you use less pigment and more water, the lighter your value will be. But the more pigment you use and the less water, the more saturated that color will be, or that hue, so the darker it can be. So if I show you just right here, you can color directly on the page with these. And I take a clean brush with just water. I can swipe it across like this, and I have watercolor on the paper. The other way to do this, and I'll show you on this one, is to use your watercolor pencil kind of like a portable paint. So I take my wet brush with just water on it, and I'm going to wet the tip of my pencil here, and then I'm going to take it directly from the brush to the paper. And there we have it. So I can just paint right on there. Let's say I wanted to go ahead and color this one directly on there. Show you what the difference looks like. Try and get a good amount of that watercolor pencil on there. Take a brush with water. A little extra swipe. Those are a little close. I might need to take some water and pull this up just a touch. Wet it. And just pull it up with a clean brush. So I just clean out my brush, swipe it, and then I can actually pull some of that paint up to make it a little lighter. Now to blend, it's just like with colored pencils, so I can start with my blue here. And I did the same thing with my markers too. Then I can go over it lightly with some black. Get my brush some water on it. Wake up those paints. And I have a shade. Kind of want to add a little bit more saturation on there. And I can't really color over top of it, so this is where it's a really good idea to use that portable paint option. Add a little more blue in there. And then if I even want to add a little more black, I can do the same thing, but I'm cleaning my brush first. And I'll get some black on there. Mix it in. That's better. So there you have it. They're a little bit backwards, but you can watercolor paint with markers. You can watercolor paint with watercolor pencils. You can watercolor paint with watercolors.